All right, anatomy and physiology students. Basically, this corresponds to the lab that we are doing in class, but it also associates with section 1.6 in our textbook, which is organization of the human body. So we did look at body cavities on page 21. That would be figure 1.9, and we said that basically the body cavities, you do have the cranial cavity, you have the vertebral canal. Of course, this is a side or lateral view. Then you have the thoracic cavity, and then you have the abdominal and the pelvic cavity, and they both come together as the abdominal pelvic cavity, where you have the abdominal and pelvic cavity that are separate. If you're looking in here, the thoracic cavity and the abdominal pelvic cavity are separated by the diaphragm. The human body itself, when you look at its orientation from the anatomical position, you do see that you have the axial portion. The axial portion of the body includes the head, neck, and trunk. And then you have the appendicular portion of the body, which includes the appendages, which are your arms and your legs. The cranial cavity itself houses the brain. The vertebral canal, of course, houses the spinal cord. When you look ventrally, which is this picture here, when you look ventrally at the human body, the thoracic cavity contains the lungs, so those are housed in the pleural cavities, so you have the right and left pleural cavity. You also have the mediastinum, and the mediastinum is this region right in here. The mediastinum itself would include the thymus, the heart, the esophagus, and the trachea. So down here, the heart is stored in an area called the pericardial cavity. And the pericardial cavity is in the center of, or medial, to both the left pleural cavity and the right pleural cavity, housing the left and right lungs. If you come down then, below that, you have the muscular diaphragm, and then below that, or you could say inferior to the thoracic cavity or the diaphragm, you have the abdominal cavity. In that abdominal cavity, you are going to have some of the major organisms, organs, not organisms, the major organs, which would include the liver, gallbladder. You'd also find in there the stomach, spleen, and small and large intestine. Also know that the kidneys, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, and the ureters are behind the abdominal pelvic cavity. So what we say is that this is retroperitoneal. So those organs are retroperitoneal in relationship to the abdominal cavity. Of course, then the last would be the pelvic cavity, and the pelvic cavity is going to house the urinary bladder, the internal reproductive organs, such as the ovaries and fallopian tubes and such, so on and so forth. So then you have the thoracic and abdominal serous membranes. This is something that may not have been covered much in much detail within the lab itself, so you're going to want to pay attention. So when you look at organization of the body, if you refer to page 22, figure 1.10, you have some cavities that are found in the head, such as the oral cavity, the nasal cavity, the orbital cavities, the middle ear cavities, and the paranasal sinuses. The paranasal sinuses are both the frontal and the sphenoidal sinuses that are pictured on that page. That is minor, but looking at the thoracic and abdominal pelvic membranes, here you have things like serous membranes. And a serous membrane is a soft, thin, pliable layer of tissue that can do one of two things. So a serous membrane is a soft, pliable layer of tissue that can either, one, cover a vital organ, And if it covers a vital organ, then we'll call that a visceral membrane. All right? Or it could do two, line a body cavity. So serous membranes can be visceral or they could be parietal. A visceral membrane is going to cover a body organ. A parietal membrane is going to line a body cavity or a body wall. There is space that is going to occur between the visceral and the parietal membrane, into which that would be filled with serous fluid. And serous fluid is secreted for lubrication. Then there are specific names for the membranes around the heart, the lungs, and the abdominal organs. If you look in the thoracic membranes, the serous membranes of the lungs, these are the membranes that cover the lungs, are called visceral pleura, because remember, visceral surrounds an organ. The membrane that lines the thoracic cavity is called the parietal pleura. The space between those two membranes is called the pleural cavity, and it's filled with serous fluid. The next area then would be the heart, so this would all be pericardial. So you have a membrane that covers the heart, that would be called the visceral pericardium. And then you have the membrane that lines the pericardial cavity, that is called the parietal pericardium. And you can see that those names are associated right here. Then you have those membranes of the abdominal pelvic membranes, or the abdominal pelvic serous membranes. And these are serous membranes that would cover or surround the cavities within the abdominal region. So the membrane that covers the liver, stomach, etc. is called visceral peritoneum. So that would be all the membranes surrounding those major organs in there. And then the membrane that is going to line the abdominal cavity is called the parietal peritoneum. The space between the membranes and between the organs and the abdominal pelvic wall will be the peritoneal cavity. And of course, then the lubrication source there would be the serous fluid that is going to occur between those things. So here you can see a picture looking at this. Here is anterior, so this is the front. This would be dorsal, and you have a cut, so you have a nice cross section there. And you can see the membranes and some of the major organs that were just discussed as they're associated with those parietal and visceral membranes and within the body cavities themselves. All right, just a general overview of the body systems. Not much here other than know that body coverings, that would be our integumentary system. It has its function: skin, hair, nails, sweat glands, sebaceous glands. Its function is to protect, regulate body temperature, and synthesize vitamin D, among other things. The skeletal system, it's basically used for support and movement. It includes such things as bones, tendons, ligaments, and cartilages. Its function is for support, protection, movement, storage of calcium ions, production of blood. Also for support and movement, you have the muscular system. Of course, then you'd have the skeletal muscles as the major organs, and their main function is for movement, heat, production, etc. The next system, which is right here in yellow, you can't see it all that well, would be the nervous system. Major organs of the nervous system include the brain, spinal cord, and nerves, and its function is for coordination of body parts and information processing. Also involved in integration and coordination would be the endocrine system. Then there you'd have the endocrine glands that are going to secrete hormones. These are all going to be used for functioning of maintenance of homeostasis, that fight or flight symptoms that you feel in an emergency situation, fluid and electrolyte balance. Transport would be both the cardiovascular and lymphatic system. Cardiovascular system here. The lymphatic system is right here. Basically, the cardiovascular system major organs include the heart and blood vessels, And of course, it would be transport. Functionally, it would be transport of nutrients, waste, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. And it too would also play a role in electrolyte maintenance. In the lymphatic system, the major organs would include bone marrow, lymph nodes, the thymus, and the spleen. And this would all play a role in control of disease, etc. Then you have those systems that are responsible for absorption and secretion. Those systems that do absorption and secretion are the respiratory system, the urinary system, and the digestive system. So the first one pictured there is the digestive system. The major organs are the oral cavity, the pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small large intestine, the salivary glands, the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder. And of course you know that is the breakdown of food into substances that can be assimilated and used and absorbed for energy. In the respiratory system, which is the next picture, right there you'd have the major organs being the nose, nasal cavity, sinuses, pharynx, larynx, trachea, the bronchial tubes within the lungs, and the alveoli. And basically the function there would be the exchange of gases, particularly oxygen gas and carbon dioxide. It would also play a role in the maintenance of blood pH and electrolytes, and plays a role with voice production. And lastly, the urinary system. Major organs of the urinary system include the kidneys, ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. And the functions here would be excretion. And excretion is the removal of metabolic waste from blood. The maintenance of blood, such as pH, pressure, etc. Also, the maintenance of electrolytes. So we have quite a few organs that play a role in the homeostasis of electrolyte balance. And then our last two systems would be those associated with reproduction, and that would be the male and female reproductive systems. The male major organs would include the testes, the epididymis, the vas deferens, the prostate gland, seminal vesicles, the bulbourethral glands, the urethra, the penis, and the scrotum. And its functions would be production, maintenance, and transport of gametes, the male gametes specifically being sperm, and also the production of sex hormones. In the female, the major organs are the ovaries, fallopian tubes, the uterus, the cervix, the vagina, the labia, and the clitoris. And basically, the function of the female reproductive system is to house the developing embryo and fetus. If we go back and look at then lifespan changes, we know that aging occurs from microscopic level to whole body level. You can think of some examples, how aging is a process of becoming mature or old. Basically, we have apoptosis. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. It begins in the fetus, although it is not apparent until later decades. And examples of aging include the following. The third decade, you start to, so 30s, you start to get gray hairs, faint facial lines, minor joint stiffness. Fourth decade, you get maternal age significant and chromosomal disorders of offspring. You get hair and facial changes continue. By the 50s, you get your hair colored phase, facial wrinkles appear. You get hypertension, hypercholesteremia, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes may appear. The sixth decade, you get waning immunity, may occur, require immunizations against influenza, pneumonia, and other infectious diseases. And then 70s, you get the continuation of all of that. Changes at the tissue level explain familiar signs of aging. Basically, changes within tissues, you get decreased production of collagen and elastin, which causes the stiffening of the skin. You get diminished levels of the subcutaneous fat, which basically leads to wrinkling. You also get fat and water proportions are going to change in tissues, and that's going to alter drug metabolism in the elderly. At the cellular level, you get impaired cell division, reduces wound healing. Inappropriate cell division could lead to cancers. Repair of damaged DNA declines, which could lead to cancer. Reduced energy extraction from nutrients. That means you have lower energy. Reduced breakdown of worn cell parts. Damaging oxygen-free radicals, lipofuscin, and steroid pigments accumulation. Free radicals in the body could also lead to cancer. Accumulation of protein called amyloid may occur in the brain and ultimately lead to a disease in some individuals known as Alzheimer's. And you get basically a generalized metabolic slowdown. So you get a diminished tolerance to cold weather, you get weight gain, and you start to develop fatigue. The rest is just the anatomical terminology. Basically, you have a definition there, a language that is used to describe the relative position of body parts that are needed for communication, both in the lecture and within the laboratory component of the course. So anatomical terminology is very important, and one of the first things we did was the anatomical position. And that's basically we're standing erect, face forward, upper limbs at side, palms forward. And then, of course, from there, you could go into the terms of relative position. So read over these in a textbook. Know them. They are important both for dissections and as we get into the body systems. Directional terminology, having its understanding will help you better understand where certain organs are. Body sections or planes can be further divided. These refer to cuts. So a sagittal cut is going to divide the body or organ into both a left and right portion. If it's mid-sagittal, you'd say that's a median. So in the middle, you have a mid-sagittal cut, which would therefore give you equal right and left portions. A transverse or a horizontal cut is going to divide the body or organ into superior and inferior portions. A coronal or a frontal cut is going to divide the body or the organ into both anterior and posterior portions. So here you can see what that would look like there. So here is the frontal, parasagittal, so you're away from the midline. Here's a mid-sagittal cut, and then here's a transverse or horizontal plane cut. And then you can see that again here within an organ. Lastly, you do have special cuts or sections or cuts of cylindrical structures, such as blood vessels, nerves, etc. The first one will be a cross-section, and a cross-section is a cut that is at 90 degrees to the longitudinal axis of the structure. You also have an oblique section. An oblique cut is cut at an angle across an object, and a longitudinal cut is a cut along the longitudinal axis of a structure. The last part would just be knowing these different body regions. So you have the right hypochondriac region, epigastric region, left hypochondriac region, right lumbar region, umbilical region, left lumbar region, the right iliac region, the hypogastric region, and the left iliac region. Know where these quadrants lie within the body and what organs do they associate with. You also have it divided into 4 quadrants, which you can see here. The right upper quadrant, abbreviated RUQ. The left upper quadrant, abbreviated LUQ. The right lower quadrant, abbreviated RLQ. And the left lower quadrant, abbreviated LLQ. And then these are the body terms. And this is also in your book. So you need to have a fairly decent understanding of all these regions of the body. So you, on the test, I will point to the ear, or there will be a line going to the ear. You won't write ear down, you would write otic. If you're talking about the front of the knee, that would be patellar. If you're talking about the back of the knee, that would be the popliteal. Okay? So make sure you do start studying all these different regions of the body. And that's pretty much it for Chapter 1. Have a great day.